Today, COVID-19 is a major threat to the world, and recently we have heard of lots of deaths in India. How could we approach this disease so dangerous to all of us? My name is Johan Magnus von Malmborg, and my interest in this kind of diseases appeared when I found how to treat HIV by accident when we had a patient with plasmacytosis after having been given streptokinase. That was a common way to treat myocardial infarction, 1991. We happened to find how to manage the immunologic deficiency after streptocinosis called plasmacytosis, which was very similar to HIV. Today the problem is COVID-19, and I did in August find that the only way to treat this disease would be by vaccination. A similar finding had been obvious for the Israeli nation and Russia and China, but here in Sweden many people thought it would be several years before we got vaccine or any way to treat except by isolation. But from the beginning, not even isolation, the opposite. Now, the problem is how to give a vaccine that is not dangerous and that could be produced in vast amounts and that is possible to produce in most countries, and most important, where resistant virus does not appear. Today we have the problem with the AstraZeneca GOG vaccine giving sinus vein thrombosis in very few cases, but a deadly side effect. This, however, ought to be possible to overcome by giving a low-dose cortisone, as far as I believe, because as has been shown in New England Journal of Medicine recently, there has been found a platelet factor antibody in all the 20 cases of death in sinus vein thrombosis that were examined in Great Britain. Thus, I would suggest we give a low-dose cortisone in a water-soluble form for cases with headache day 6 to 21, 6 to 28, I would say, after having given the AstraZeneca or Janssen, also called G&G vaccine. By this precaution, I think it is most probable that there will not appear more such sinus vein thrombosis and deaths after this vaccine. It is so rare, so it is not possible to make clinical studies. But of course, if this becomes a routine, we will soon know if it is working as it should. Now, why do I recommend the AstraZeneca or G&G vaccine kind for the COVID-19? Today we have two major kind of vaccines. One is this AstraZeneca kind, and the other are various RNA vaccines that are made up by artificial technology And the later kind are of course very narrow in their effect to the virus. They act on a special protein and on that very site, but the AstraZeneca that has been made from patients where of course the persons with the most antibody response are chosen, and thus the effect against various is much broader. This, I believe, is the way to overcome the risk of developing resistance against vaccine. And thus, the AstraZeneca should not be put aside. It should be used, and may be used even more than the rarer RNA vaccines. Another important thing is that it has been produced, for example, in India in 80 million doses, and this, of course, is important today when we have so many COVID-19 cases and deaths in India. And a similar situation is, of course, abundant all over the world. So this is my recommendation of how to handle COVID-19. Don't be afraid of the AstraZeneca or J&J kind of vaccine. And I know that a lot of vaccines from, for example, Russia and China are made up in a similar way. Don't be afraid, because those vaccines have a broader effect or on more variation in the COVID-19 than has the narrow artificial vaccines, the RNA vaccines, becoming used instead of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and that is probably a very bad way to approach this. So now produce AstraZeneca vaccine or J&J vaccine as much as possible in as many countries as possible, and give